Hi, like Patrick said, my name is Mike McKeen. My company is Twin Cities Backup, and if you get bored or start to fall asleep, please go grab some water or beer or something just to keep yourself awake. This is about backup, so it's not the most exciting presentation, but at the same time, it's very important to every business, and not only every business, but your own personal data at home as well. So the title is what you must have in place now to get a fast and easy recovery of your data. Real quick, there's two names here, Twin Cities Backup and 010 Innovations. We started off as an IT services company, and we still do that. That's our main bread and butter, but at the same time, you have to do backups within your business in order to keep functioning. A few years back, we found out we realized that a lot of our small businesses had multiple systems in place in order to, patch things together to make sure that they had the backup process that they wanted. And it was really inefficient and it was very difficult to manage, so we decided let's create a new brand and let's find a product that can take care of everything without having to jump across to 5 different applications to get this done. So in '99 we started as the IT company. We spun off in 2006 to become 010 Innovations. As we started growing in 2012, we added a dedicated help desk, which is huge to backup. If you need data restored, you want to be able to call somebody and get that back right now and not have to wait 5 hours or 5 days or 5 weeks in order to get that information. So what is backup? Very simply, it's a separate copy of your data, your important stuff, your photos, your videos, your business documents, your emails, this PowerPoint. These are important things that we got to have more than one copy of this information. Why do you care? 30% of people have never backed up. Isn't that astounding? This is just, to me, this is basic business. With anything, you want to make sure you have multiple copies of those. 1 in 10 computers are infected with viruses each month. With our managed service, that number is not as bad as that, but they still happen. People get infected with things just by going to certain websites. A few years back, the Pioneer Press, their website was hacked, and just by viewing the newspaper website, their computers got hacked. Have you ever lost a phone or dropped your phone in the toilet? These types of things we want to make sure that we're protected against. In the loss of files, it's way more common than you would think. Simple things, human errors, like I was working on this Excel spreadsheet, I've been working on it all day, and my computer crashed, and I haven't saved it. That happens all the time. So we want to make sure that we're protecting against this stuff. From a business perspective, you got to think about, can your business survive? So a couple of these different pictures, this is a little sabotage computer hacker guy. The building caved in because of snow, fire, flood. These types of things are very important to your business and things that you need to think about in order to protect your business. They don't happen every day. When was the last time you personally were involved in a fire? Hopefully never, and certainly not with any sort of frequency, right? But at the same time, if I'm going to keep my business running and protected, I need to think about what happens if there's a fire and how am I going to recover from that. There's a statistic that 43% of businesses go out of business immediately if there's a fire or some similar sort of disaster, and you guys don't want that to be your business. When I started my company, I didn't do this just to have a job. I did this to have a future. And I want to make sure my business is protected, and if something like this happens to me, I still have a business tomorrow. So this is the most important slide here. This is how we're going to keep this going and get this through this presentation pretty quickly, is the 5 critical things you need to know about backup. There's actually 3 terms that are related to this: backup, disaster recovery, and business continuity. I'm not going to really get into that. I'm just going to focus on that backup piece. So the first one is Dropbox is not a backup. How many of you have heard of Dropbox? And how many of you use Dropbox? I'll talk a little bit about that service or that type of service in a minute here. Store your backups in multiple formats as well as multiple locations. I'm going to teach you about not trusting the cloud and not trusting your backup. Okay? Number 1, Dropbox is not a backup. Dropbox is a great application. I'm a huge fan of it. I use it personally. And there are other services that are very similar to Dropbox that overcome some of those limitations or some of those security risks, those types of things. But from a backup perspective, it's not designed to be a backup. It's designed to be a file syncing application. So initially, when you install the Dropbox application on your computer and you put a file into that Dropbox, what it does is it automatically takes that file and puts it into the cloud. So now you've got 2 copies and they're in different locations, so you've got a backup. Well, what happens if you delete that file and then decide 2 months later that you want to have that file back? Dropbox has a retention period of only 30 days. So after 30 days of you deleting that file, you can't get it back. So that's one of the bigger reasons why it's not a backup. The other part is this is a syncing location. People have used this in their business to share files with other people. And what they do is they drop a file into the Dropbox and it automatically shows up on this other person's computer. Well, what happens if that was a picture that you didn't want shared? All you did was save it on your computer, and that was great, and you got this backup because now it's in the cloud, but now it's on this other person's computer as well. Also, if you're going to be restoring data, you can't just go and choose all your files and bring them back to be restored. You got to go in and choose each file and do them one at a time, which works great if you were working on your Excel spreadsheet and made a change to it and saved it multiple times throughout the day and you want to get this morning's revision back. That works great. But if I have a chunk of data, Word documents, PowerPoint, Excel, all those types of things, and I want to bring them back all at once, it's very tedious and time consuming. So Dropbox, you can consider it a form of backup, but it shouldn't be your primary form of backup. Number 2, you want to store your backups in multiple formats. When you're saving your data into a second copy, it's not sufficient just to have it on a single format, because backups or restores fail just as much as a backup fails. Like Patrick alluded to before, your backups you could think that they're working great, but when you go to do the restore, that's when you find out that they've been failing. Had a client, a mortgage company, they were a new prospect for us, and part of the onboarding process is to figure out what they're doing for their backups. Well, they were using tapes at the time, and they had their office manager putting in a tape every single day, and his email was coming in saying the backup completed successfully, and ultimately what we found out was that they hadn't had a backup in over 6 months. Not a single backup had occurred, even though they were being diligent about it. So restores can fail just as much as the backup process itself. Media doesn't last forever. How many of you use thumb drives as your backup source? That's good. The problem with thumb drives is they're small, they get lost. My kids, he's starting to have to use those in school. Oh my goodness, I've gone through 3 of them and it's not even, we're halfway through the school year. So they're small, they're easily lost, but they're just as susceptible to failure and abuse as well. Tape drives are a good example. In a business, if you have a tape and you're taking that tape off-site, well, I don't know about you, but when I go home from work, most of the time I'm not going directly home. I'm going to wrestling or gymnastics or soccer or something else like that. Having a tape sit in a car on a hot summer day is going to affect that media and make it less likely that you're going to be able to perform that restore. So make sure that when you're doing a backup that you're putting this stuff on different formats. Use a tape and a second hard drive, or use a tape and the cloud, something like that, just so that you have multiple locations for that stuff. Again, multiple locations. We want to have this stuff. We don't want to have all this stuff in one place. We don't want to have all our eggs in one basket. The biggest example is on-site and off-site. If you're doing a backup, Mac uses an application called Time Machine. And what you generally do is you go to Office Depot or Best Buy and you buy an external hard drive, plug that in, and Time Machine automatically backs up all your data, the whole system, to that external drive, which is great because you have a backup. You've got your live data and now you've got a backup. The problem is that backup is attached to your computer that's in your house or in your business. And what happens in that fire or flood? They both go down. We don't want to have that sort of problem. We want to make sure that they're in different locations. And I was talking about this a little bit earlier. I've got a couple different cloud providers that I use. One of them is local, and I like, as an IT company, being able to say that we're using local Minnesota company to be the cloud provider so I can drive down there and get my data if I need it today. But at the same time, that doesn't fit every business's needs. Sometimes we need to have that in a different location. Specifically, if there's a tornado, there's very likely the possibility that it's going to take out your house and your business depending on where you live. There was a tornado in northeast Minneapolis, the one in Plymouth. You could take out both of those locations with the same devastating problem. If our data, our backups, are geographically dispersed, we've got a copy in Michigan, we got a copy in Alexandria, East Coast, West Coast. Now we've got some separation, so if there's some sort of disaster, I can still recover that stuff. Type has a high failure rate, so if that's one of your options to be backing up, that's fine. But just make sure that you know that those tapes are going to have to be replaced over time. And with tape, they're easy to be able to take out of your office and take it to another location. External hard drives, they're cheap and they have a lot of capacity, which is very nice, but those have a similar sort of failure. If I drop that, that makes that hard drive very difficult to be able to even run, let alone get data off. And the recovery costs to get stuff off a hard drive are very expensive. There's a company here in town that they charge you like $900 just to look at it, and then after they've decided, oh yeah, we can get some stuff, they say, this is your cost. Not, here's your sliding scale, I can get this stuff but not this stuff. It's, I'm giving you this data back and this is how much it costs, take it or leave it. So it can be expensive to recover that sort of data. We already talked about the USB drives and the problems with those. One thing that we've seen as infections and malware and those types of things become more prevalent, you pick up a USB drive you found in the parking lot and you come plug it into your computer, you're very likely susceptible to some sort of infection. So that's another source of getting or having to need to use your backup. The cloud makes storing this data in multiple locations easier, right? Because it can be automated and it can run in the background. I can just install an application on my computer, and as soon as that file is saved, it gets pushed off-site into the cloud. So now I've got it in two different locations. I got it on my laptop, wherever I'm at, and I've also got it in the cloud. So we can get those in multiple locations very easily. At the same time, you don't want to trust the cloud. If you look for Google, Dropbox, Office 365, Salesforce, and look at security breaches or look at articles about lost data, all of these services are designed to be redundant, but not necessarily have that built-in backup function. So if you have, Dropbox is a great example. If you save a file or a file gets infected with a virus or something like that, it's making multiple copies on their redundant servers. So that's great. If one of their servers goes down, that infected file's on another one of their servers. That's redundancy. That's not necessarily having multiple copies. In pretty much all of these cloud providers, you can search the internet and find people that say, oh yeah, I lost my whole Google mailbox, or I lost all my Salesforce data. With Salesforce specifically, they do have a backup process built in, but if you go through their FAQs or you look at their terms in their agreement, the minimum cost to get started to do that recovery is $10,000. And not only is it 5 digits in money to start with, but the turnaround time, I think the website says like 2 weeks. Well, if your data's down, if you can't get access to your client information for 2 weeks, how's that going to impact your business? So even though the cloud is great to be able to get this stuff out there and they've got built-in redundancy, you still have to back up these processes yourself. The other thing is, what if you want to move from Google to Office 365? That process isn't easy without having a backup. If I've got a backup, I can take this data and recover it to a different location. When I say the cloud, I'm just talking about having your data not stored physically in your hands. It's not something that's on the hard drive, on your laptop, on your external drive there in your office. It's accessing this data over the internet. So because you're connected to the internet, you're susceptible. So you got to make sure that even if you're using a cloud service, that you're backing that up as well. And the last thing is, don't trust your backup. Here I am talking to you and tell you to do backups, and this is very important. You got to protect this stuff. But don't take it for granted that that report that says the backup is happening, don't take that for granted. Don't take that at its word, right? You need to make sure that you're testing that data. Make sure you can recover data with some sort of regularity. Coming up on March 31st is World Backup Day. You believe it or not, that is a thing. Just like there's Talk Like a Pirate Day, there's also World Backup Day. I like their tagline on their website, don't be an April Fool. So that's just a way for us to bring awareness that you need to be making a backup. And again, you can't trust that your backup's working. You have to do some sort of test, some sort of recovery. Depending on the software you have, the software could have the ability to perform that recovery themselves. And basically what they do is it looks at the data that you have in your main repository or your main production location, and then it looks at the data that it has in the backup, and it makes sure that both locations have that. And I love this one. Make sure your backup's even running. People install their applications and they just assume that it's working. But depending on what's going on in your computer or programs that you've installed or infections that you've run against, your backup software may not even be running anymore, even though you've installed it. So make sure it's running. To sum up, first of all, you need to create a plan and you need to do it right now. Go home right after this and today, let's do these backups. But World Backup Day is coming up, so you got a couple days before you can have to get that completed. Something is better than nothing. That 30% of people that don't have any sort of backup, they're obviously very vulnerable. And there's always stories that go along with, oh man, I was on vacation and I lost my camera, and this was the most fun vacation that I've had with my kids, and I don't have any documentation for that. We don't want to hear those stories from you guys. Backup doesn't have to be expensive. Cheap is available. Cheap backups are available. But it's not always the best solution, and it doesn't always fit your needs. So make sure that whatever solution that you're putting in fits your needs. An example would be, I have clients that if they lost data, they are okay with losing a whole month's worth of data, just so long as their business is back up and going based on the way they run their business. I have other clients that say, if our data is lost in the afternoon, I want to be able to recover from what we did this morning. So each of your businesses are a little bit different. So you need to, when you're picking out a solution, make sure that it fits your needs. And that's about it. If you have questions, help@twincitiesbackup.com. It's our phone number and our contact information.
Michael, how close are we to getting to the point where I'm not so worried about losing data as I am when I have to move from one computer to another one?
Sure.
And ghosting, or whatever you call it. I mean, I would love to be able to just take the new laptop, plug it in, and in the morning I've got exactly what I had, but on a new laptop.
So there's two parts to that. From a business perspective, cloud is huge. And leveraging applications that take advantage of the cloud are just as important. So for that type of thing, you can actually have your computer completely run in the cloud. So all of your applications, all of your data is stored there. So it doesn't matter what device I'm connecting from, my phone, my tablet, my laptop, my office computer, I'm always looking at that same information. So there's no migration because all that stuff is in the cloud. And the other part is those file syncing applications similar to Dropbox make that so much easier because I put Dropbox on that new computer and all that data just starts showing up. So those options are available. From a migration standpoint, they work great, but they're not necessarily a backup for you. Does anybody else have? Yes.
Two questions. First, is Hallmark aware of that backup day?
Probably not.
I mean, they got cards for everything, right?
Of course.
How does, so, you know, I hear on the radio, I think it's called Carbon Express or something like that.
Yes.
Carbon what?
Carbonite.
Carbonite, yeah. Is that what you're calling the cloud, or is that different than?
Carbonite is a cloud backup provider, yes. And Carbonite is really good in getting that data off-site. That's what they're designed to do. The problem that I have with Carbonite is that they're not going to help me with my backup, okay? If you Neither. That's not their service model. Their service model is we can store any information that you decide to back up. You have to decide what you back up. You have to decide what sort of frequency. They have some built-in templates that automatically back up like My Documents and that type of stuff. But if you store stuff on your desktop, that could be lost. If you've created your own folders, those things could be lost. So if you call them up and say, hey, can you help me with a restore? Sure, let me take a look. And they find out, oh, well, you weren't backing that up. It's because they never helped you on the front end to make sure you were getting the pieces that you need. So it's a great service. It's one of the cheap options that are out there. Matter of fact, as we were setting this up, both Dropbox and Carbonite came up on Patrick's computer. So as an example of multiple locations and multiple providers, kudos to you. I'm not sure if you're actually using both of those, but they are a low-cost provider, and they definitely do work.
Mike, do you see them as a competition to you, or do you think it's for you as more of a separate niche, more of a service-oriented?
So Twin Cities Backup was designed to be a single application to back up all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm a Carbonite reseller. I'm a Mozy reseller. One of my favorite ones, Patrick mentioned this earlier, there's a company in Minneapolis called Code 42, and their application is called Crash Plan. I would choose Crash Plan over Mozy or Carbonite any day. We're a reseller of Crash Plan. We have our own Crash Plan data store as well. So I say this to everybody about all our different technologies. What works for your business may not be what's needed for Patrick's business, and what may not be what's needed for Michael's business. As our consultation, I'm going to sit down with you and find out what does this work for your business. Do you need to be back up and going today with your data? Well, we're probably not going to use Crash Plan. We're probably not going to use Carbonite. But if I've got a client that they're a web designer similar to Bob, the only thing that matters to Bob right now is the website that he's working on right now. So Carbonite, Mozy, Crash Plan, those type of applications are great for that, because if he loses all his data, he restores that one website that he's working on right now and keeps right on working. It takes him whatever, the 5 or 10 minutes it takes to download that information. So that might work for his business. So it all depends on your business.
Since you outed me for using Carbonite, when I first started using it, I've got like 7 years worth of New Business Minnesotas. Each of the photos that I have is probably 70 megabytes. Sure. I've got big files. I have PDF files that are 50 megabytes. It's a whole issue.
So how many days
when I go to
take for that backup to happen?
And the first time it was like, we're backing you up now. And 2 days later, they were still backing me up. A week later, they were still grabbing stuff, and it went on and on and on.
And that's just for one laptop. That's just for one desktop. Now try to multiply that in a business environment where you've got 20 people working on one server and doing that sort of backup. That's not...
Actually, a lot of that is archiving. So if I suddenly need something from 2008, I can get it. But I haven't had to do that since 2009.
Thank God there's people like him, because I don't...
Yeah, well, the whole idea is that if my environment was different and I suddenly needed that information, it's going to take a week, 2 weeks for me to get back to where I need to be. That's why when I change computers, I always have my old computer in the closet, and It's always working. So if something happens, I've got everything I need to operate is there, and then I can download maybe the 10 files that I desperately need, like from my QuickBooks.
Certainly. Thank you for your time.